So I've got this old Sears Tele-Games Hockey Pong dedicated system here. I'm really curious to see what Hockey Pong actually is, whether it's just a straight up clone of Pong or if it's some sort of variation. Maybe there's some forwards or some extra paddles in there. Who knows? At the moment, this one's not working. It's in really rough shape. As you can see, the top just lifts off there. I did not take any screws off or anything like that. So I'm going to see what I can do to get it working. It appears that this thing took 6 C batteries. Now, I have no intention of hopefully ever buying C batteries again, so I'd like to get it working off of AC power. It does have a power jack on the back here. I don't have the adapter, but since we know that it takes 6 C batteries at 1.5 volts apiece, it should just use a 9 volt adapter, which coincidentally is exactly what the Atari 2600 came with. So I was going to give that a try. Of course not. It's a little bit smaller, doesn't fit. But I've got an idea. I do have this replacement power jack for an Atari 2600 on hand, and I don't think there's any reason that I can't just rewire the system to use this power jack and then use the same power supply as the Atari 2600. First of all, I'm going to remove these nasty wires in here, take the insides out so that it's a little bit easier to work with. Okay, so I think I'm left with the only piece I care about. To prepare our new power plug here, the first thing I'm going to do is just snip off all the wires to the old one. Pretty much toss that, and I'm going to toss the battery pack connector too. So I did a little bit of research, and the way that these audio jack style power plugs actually work is the outer part is the ground, and the positive actually comes from the front. So just by looking at this power jack, it's pretty easy to tell that by plugging this in, the outer part will be the ground. So this first one will be the ground, and then this will touch this first piece that comes here. So that'll be the positive, and then that should be the negative. So we've got ground, positive, negative. So then I'm going to secure these with just a little bit of solder. Well, it's quite an amateur soldering job, but hopefully it'll do the trick. Okay, let's just go ahead and get the rest of this taken apart here. These just pull right off. Now, if these knobs here are anything like the paddles on the Atari 2600, you can remove this nut with a 9/16 deep well socket. And you need the deep well so that you can get around the post. Let's see here. Yep, just the same. Alright, let's put this thing halfway back together at least. And here we go. Nothing. Well, let's test some voltages. So we're getting more than the needed 9 volts. It's getting around 14 volts. We're going to pop out this chip and just kind of clean it off and reseat it and see if that makes any difference. So since there's only 2 electrolytic capacitors on this thing, I went ahead and ordered a replacement for both. And this one here is actually a little suspicious, so I'm hoping that that could be one of the problems here. So the 2 of them that are on here are a 50 volt 5 microfarad and a 100 microfarad 25 volt. So I'm just going to go ahead and replace both of those and see what happens. So just out of curiosity, I want to test out the capacitance on these old capacitors here. This is the one that's supposed to be 100 microfarads. And it's pretty high. These could just have a really high tolerance, and this thing is resilient to it. This is the one that looked bad. Also pretty high. It was supposed to be 5 microfarads. I don't know if those are far enough off to actually cause our problem, but can't hurt to get in these new ones here, which are definitely reading much closer to what we want to see. So yeah, they're just a little bit above 5 and a little bit above 100, what we're supposed to see. So these are definitely closer in range to what they're supposed to be rated at. All right, let's get them on the board. Okay, not too bad. I've got this board out though. I'm going to go ahead and clean it up just a little bit. Alright, let's go ahead and put it back together and try again. Alright, moment of truth. Still nothing. Alright, after soldering on some fresh capacitors and no change in functionality, still not working, I decided to take a step back and do a little bit more troubleshooting. And I kind of realized I missed an important step here when I was wiring up my new AC jack here. So we have a ground on this, and I think that I need to tie that in to the ground circuit on the board itself. So what I tried to do here is figure out exactly where a good tie-in point would be, And what I did was do a little bit of research on the chip that's on this board here, this chip here. And I found out that pin number 2 is the ground pin. And I don't know if you can see in the video, but there's actually it's labeled number 1 right here. So this is actually number 2. So following these traces, I was able to determine that it actually ends up going out here where the RF modulator plugs in, which makes total sense. One of those you would expect to be ground. So following this trace, you can see it comes to this guy right here, flipping the board over, jumps right up here, and then across, down, and up, and that seems to indicate that this first pin on the left is the ground. But I want to double check that we have continuity there. So I've got my multimeter set to the continuity setting, and just double check. Yep, we do. And nothing on the other 2 pins. So that's definitely our ground. So what I'm gonna do here is I went ahead and snipped a piece of wire off of the battery pack connector that I was just gonna throw away. And I'm gonna go ahead and tie that into this pin here and the ground connector on our jack. And I'll say again, I'm definitely not an electrical engineer by any means. I certainly would not be trying little experiments like this if I wasn't willing to lose this device entirely. I'm just having a little bit of a learning adventure here. Okay, so getting the soldering iron back out here. All right, let's try to put it back together another time and see how it goes. All right, that's fantastic. Okay. So, let's see. Oh, potentiometers actually work fairly smoothly, it seems. I don't know why this one's controlling both, but... Oh, there's the hockey portion of it. So each player actually controls 3 paddles? This player seems to only have 2, though. Well, this player has 3. This is really cool. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take this back apart, clean up the plastic, and try to put it back together again. Now that I've got everything nice and cleaned up, it's time to put it back together. First thing I'm gonna have to do is super glue these little posts back on to the front piece here, because that's why the front piece was completely loose when I got this thing, is these plastic mounts where the screws actually go in were busted. So I did have to snap off these little tabs that were holding in the speaker to take it off while I washed it, because I didn't want to get it wet. So I'm going to just put just a little bit of hot glue there to make sure it stays in. Time to put the main PCB back in. So I misjudged how much wire I was actually going to need for my new ground here to actually run from this side all the way down and back over here. So I'm going to have to cut this and put a little bit of a extension in the middle, unfortunately. So this is turning into a little bit of a Frankenstein job here, but I don't feel too bad since it wasn't really in the land of the living when I first got it. I'm going to secure the new power jack with some hot glue and electrical tape. Okay, and the last step is to put the knobs back on. So now that it's working, I thought we'd run through all 4 of the different game modes and see what they're all about. So the first one is obviously just standard Pong or tennis. What is interesting though is you can increase the speed to fast, and it's crazy fast. If you were to turn the paddle from large to small, this is the most hardcore game of Pong I can imagine. This would be really fun, actually. Ooh. So then game 2, I think this is the one that is intended to be hockey. So you actually have goals on both sides and a forward or offense and defense players. So this could be pretty cool too. Then game 3 is basically racquetball, which is pretty awesome too. I don't understand why they labeled this Hockey Pong. You would have thought they would have wanted to market all 4 games, but they just wanted to go with hockey. And then the last one is just single player mode, which is really cool. I'm glad they included this. This is nice. Oddly enough, though, the speed does not seem to take effect on single player mode, which is kind of disappointing. I can go to a smaller paddle, though, to make it a little harder for myself. So I think that's it. I'm super excited to have this thing in my collection in working condition, and I hope you've all enjoyed watching.